welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. President Trump threatens to double tariffs on Canadian metals, escalating a trade war with America's northern neighbour. Meanwhile, Wall Street opens lower as fears of a slowdown continue to fuel a sell-off. Plus, while the struggling online retailer Boohoo is rebranding itself as Debenhams. Very good afternoon on this Tuesday Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, President Trump says he will double planned tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium from 25 to 50%, escalating a trade war with America's northern neighbour. He says the increase, which is due to take effect tomorrow, is in response to price rises the government of Ontario put on electricity sold to the US. Well, the announcement adds fuel to fears of a slowdown, with the Wall Street sell-off continuing today following yesterday's ride. Well, let's get more on this. Let's speak to Sahil Matani, who is head of macro research at 91 Investment Institute. A very good afternoon to you. Let's start with Canada, if we can. It's just happened this afternoon, hasn't it? This threat, more than a threat, saying he will add additional tariffs. What has gone on here? Because there's clearly pretty sour relations between now Canada and the United States.
Hi, Darren. Yeah, I think this is a significant sign of intent that the tariffs are real. I think whether they stay at this level or not, it depends on what comes next in the administration's policy. I think markets are looking out for April 2nd, which is when policy on reciprocal tariffs is announced, and I think that will be, the big deal here.
It will indeed be the big deal, and we always know that Donald Trump can change his mind even at the last minute. But fundamentally, even with those ebbs and flows, it does seem that this idea that he would use tariffs simply as a threat is no longer the case. I mean, this is a reality now we may well have to get used to.
Yeah, exactly. I think the market narrative earlier this year, which is the tariffs were mainly tactical to get non-economic concessions, I think that is dissipating, and there is a sign that some of the tariffs will stick. But if you take a step back and try to look at what the market is worried about at the moment, it's the sign that the tariffs will contribute, along with DOGE and immigration policy, to a U.S. economic slowdown. And that's what you're seeing in the data and the price action.
Yeah, and we're going to have a press conference on the White House at around 5 o'clock this evening, as viewers can see on the screen. I suppose, what does then happen next? There's been lots of suggestions that actually, Donald Trump may get to a point where if the US tips into recession or the poll numbers change, he may well change course. But he's also in the past, hasn't he, talked about how tariff is the most beautiful word in the English language. How much is this about economics? Because, and he's talked about this for a long time, about trying to return the manufacturing base back to the United States.
Yeah, I think so this is the question. What is Trump's objective, and where is the Trump put? I think on the objectives, they are clearly willing to pursue short-term pain for a period of structural transformation in the US economy. And in their view, the US economy is very misbalanced. The manufacturing sector has shrunk, And global imbalances are very large, with the Chinese having large current account surpluses and the US having large current account deficits, and they want to rebalance that. And they are judging that it makes sense to do it in the earlier part of their term, so that in a few years' time, the economy will have recalibrated and they'll be in a better place. That's the theory. The question is, how does this work out in practice? Where is their level of pain tolerance? I think it's not here. I think they're willing to have a little bit more pain. And actually, in a way, you have to tolerate pain to have structural transformation in any economy.
Yeah, it's almost, in many ways, as if they're almost encouraging the pain by talking openly about a possible recession. Just very finally, just on the specifics of steel and aluminium, because that's going to happen tomorrow, these tariffs. What impact is that likely to have, and what sectors are likely to be impacted most?
Yeah, I mean, so will it happen? It remains to be seen. I think steel is upstream. What's downstream is a lot of industrial companies, primarily in the auto sector. So that's where the market pain is concentrated today.
OK, Sahil, really appreciate your analysis this afternoon from 91 there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, analysts at Citigroup have cut their recommendation for US stocks to neutral from overweight after recession fears hit the market, arguing that America's economy may no longer outpace the rest of the world in the coming months. Well, let's speak to Dirk Willier, who is from Citigroup. Very good afternoon to you. You're making the argument, I think, this afternoon that American exceptionalism may not be over, but it might be on pause.
Exactly. I think that's the right way to look at it. And you've seen it already playing out in the FX market very clearly as well, right? The euro has turned the corner. We've been long euro for a few days. But I think what's basically happening is that you have fiscal policies that get much more aggressive in Europe. And to some extent, they even get somewhat more aggressive in China. And you have the opposite going on in the US. Right, and the fiscal impulse was a big part, I think, of the US outperformance. It was a big reason why people were so bullish and gung-ho about Trump. No one saw him as someone who really tries to cut fiscal spending. And that is a bit of a reassessment. And that's why a lot of the Trump trades are not working anymore. And what you're seeing right now is that our economists are upgrading German GDP forecasts, European GDP forecasts on the back of that. They're upgrading Chinese GDP forecasts. But, we have been below consensus for the US for a long time. So we're not cutting our GDP forecast, but we're sitting at 1.1% for the US, so well below consensus. And that view is starting to play out more. So it's quite a sea change, really.
It is. And we're looking at the Dow again this afternoon. As you can see, it's down at 1.25% there, 1.25%. The sell-off is continuing after a pretty brutal day yesterday. I don't know if you heard our conversation. We're talking about how much pain, if you like, the Trump administration is prepared to take.
Yeah, that is indeed the key question. The most frequent client question is, where's the Trump put, where's the Fed put? Right, because those two things were meant to be in place. And it's quite extraordinary. In his first term, Trump tweeted about the equity market left, right, and center, usually in a positive light, obviously, especially in 2017. This term, he's tweeting about oil, which he wants lower, about treasury yields, which he wants lower, but not all that much on the S&P. And if anything, he sounded, at least he didn't close the door that there could be a recession in the US, right? So it's a very different type of Trump in terms of which market prices he seems to care about, which is very interesting. And in some sense, the opposite in China, where President Xi, the Chinese government has been much more actively supportive lately. So it's really, that's another reason why this US exceptionalism may be pausing for longer.
And just finally, Dirk, what do you think about this suggestion that actually this is something that President Trump wants, if you like? He wants to see a stock market correction. Do you think that's fair? Some people seem to be suggesting it as trying to understand the Trump rationale for what's going on here.
Yeah, and I think no one really knows, right? But I would say if you believe you came into your term with an overvalued equity market, And so if you believe there has to be a correction, you obviously prefer it earlier rather than later. So that much is probably true. I wouldn't think that he actively wants a lower equity market. He just cares more about tariffs than about the equity performance of over any quarter or two. But in a sense, tariff revenues that he needs to finance the tax cuts are here to stay, mostly. So you put the tariff in once, you collect the money for a long, long time, even though it maybe marginally decreases. The equity pain could be forgotten in a quarter or two, right? So I think that calculus does play a role.
OK, Dirk, really appreciate your time live from New York this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed from Citigroup there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's fascinating that we've had dozens of guests on this story over the last couple of weeks, and everyone concludes that they don't quite know what's going on, unsurprisingly, in Donald Trump's head. And hence, we have to keep guessing about where the US and he may well turn to next. But we will have continuing coverage, not least of all when those tariffs get imposed on aluminium and steel tomorrow here on Sky. But let's move on to Manchester United, because they have revealed plans to build a new 100,000-seater stadium, which will be the biggest in the country. The club says that the project could bring billions of pounds to the UK economy, create more than 90,000 jobs, and add almost 20,000 new homes to the local Old Trafford area. Let's speak to Matt Hardy. He's Deputy Sports Editor at City AM. Matt, very good afternoon to you. It is extraordinary that this football club, Manchester United, that is performing incredibly badly in the Premier League, is in great financial distress, still want to build such an extraordinarily large stadium.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's amazing, isn't it, how football's changed from, 11-a-side onto the pitch to what it is today. You look at what Tottenham Hotspur have done with their stadium, you look at what Barcelona and Real Madrid are doing with theirs, the countless number that are going to feature in the World Cup in America in the next couple of years, as well as Canada and Mexico. And this is the future of stadia. This is what we're going to see going forward. It's not just about bums on seats, it's about revenue making in and around stadiums, and especially on non-match days.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just bums on seat for football. I mean, clearly stadia, I think that's the plural, isn't it? Is now also their pop concert venues, and they've got lots of other stuff happening.
Yeah, and obviously something Manchester United are going to have to contend with is that just across the way there's Old Trafford, the cricket stadium, that is very, very famous at the moment for putting on really good concerts. So there's going to be some really local competition in Manchester there. But this is something I think beyond sport, a lot of people can get behind. Having a really good 100,000-seater in the north is brilliant for more than just football.
It definitely is. But at the same time, this is also a transformation, not just, it must be said, for Man United and that stadium. This is part of a wider regeneration, isn't it, of Old Trafford and that part of Manchester, if you like.
Yeah, it's going to include changes to local railways, both cargo and passenger. It's also going to change the way public transport works. They're part of the regeneration task force, included the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, as well as the likes of Gary Neville and Lord Sebastian Coe, who's running to be leader of the International Olympic Committee. So yeah, this is really important. It's a big business generator. It's going to have massive knock-on effects for contractors, for the construction industry. And I think one of your colleagues at Sky Sports got out of the government earlier that there's not yet been a refusal that taxpayer money will be involved, but we don't expect too much of that to be there. Yeah,
and we're looking currently at the moment, Matt, of the old stadium that is, as we can see, not necessarily in the best of conditions. But I come back to my fundamental question here is, I've listened to interviews with Sir Jim Radcliffe in the last couple of days, who's talked about the financial distress the company is over, removing even free lunches from employees. How are they going to manage to fund this stadium?
So it looks like the chief executive, Omar Barada, has said that there's probably going to be some, private backing in there somewhere. I imagine they will try and lobby the government for some sort of funding, whether the government kind of, answer their calls. That yet to be seen, but that's probably quite unlikely. For the stadium anyway, you can see, a good argument for government funding to help the wider regeneration, especially with their agenda at the moment on jobs and building 1.5 million houses. So you can kind of see a mix of both there. But yeah, you do look at the majority stakeholders there, the Glazer family and the wealth they have. And you look at the wealth Jim Ratcliffe has, and you do think that a lot of the public will definitely not want to see taxpayer money going there.
OK, Matt, Appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much. That's Matt there from City AM. Now, a Sky News investigation has revealed how some of Britain's biggest recruitment companies were linked to large-scale tax avoidance when placing workers into their jobs, including some government roles over the course of 2 decades. Many of these workers were paid by third-party umbrella companies with their salaries given as loans to allow them to circumvent income tax. Well, our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, has been looking into this.
Well, they keep sending letters when I was in hospital. Eventually, I have to send in the doctor's report, and they stop sending me letters.
A brief respite, but living with debt is a constant ordeal. HMRC is demanding that Manuel pay back tax, which should have been deducted from his pay.
I've been told I'm guilty, and I got to pay. But the people who did the scheme can come back and do it again.
In 2006, Manuel was recruited as a piping supervisor by Atlantic Resourcing, the recruitment arm of energy giant Petrofac. His recruiter connected him to a third party known as an umbrella company, which managed his pay and claimed it was paying all relevant tax. It was operating a tax avoidance scheme. HMRC caught on and hit him with a £4,000 bill.
By the time I couldn't pay it, I was short of money because I had a cancer and I couldn't work. I thought, why should they not pay any money?
Petrofac was not legally responsible for collecting the tax, and the company said it is not involved in or responsible for the administration of taxes for self-employed limited company contractors. We are therefore not able to comment on the tax affairs of such contractors. Manuel is not alone. Around 50,000 people across Britain, including cleaners, nurses and council workers, are facing tax demands after falling into tax avoidance schemes. These schemes were not illegal, but used tax loopholes, paying workers loans instead of salaries to avoid income tax. Many saw deductions on their pay slips, which they wrongly assumed were taxes. Instead, the schemes were pocketing them in fees.
In the Red Book, we set out in detail the action we will take to shut down disguised remuneration schemes.
The loan charge was introduced in 2019 to recoup the missing tax. It transferred the legal responsibility for collecting the tax onto the workers. They say they were let down by the agencies they trusted. And Sky News has seen evidence of major recruitment agencies, such as Hays, recommending umbrella companies that turned out to be tax avoidance schemes. A spokesperson for Hays said, Hays engages only with umbrella companies that appropriately meet legal and financial obligations. We conduct thorough due diligence when adding an umbrella company to our PSL list.
Schemes like these were littered throughout the recruitment supply chain. Agencies pushed them, accountants greenlit them, lawyers approved them. But they were ticking time bombs waiting to go off. And now it's the workers who are paying the price.
Ministers are now strengthening the law to make recruitment agencies responsible for tax collection. But that provides little comfort to those who have already fallen foul. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
You're watching Business Live on Sky News. Coming up after the break, a major rebrand for the struggling online fashion retailer Boohoo. Talking about that in just a couple of minutes.
Here we go.
2, 1.
Thank you, Sophie.
The big announcement.
The battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It was a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. I've witnessed migration across Europe close up.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives?
free wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
$1,500 movies? I don't want this flight to end. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Now, the parent company of the struggling online fashion retailer Boohoo says it's renaming itself as Debenhams, the Debenhams Group. The company says it is has completed a successful turnaround of the Debenhams brand. You may remember it collapsed way back in 2020 and saw the loss of some 12,000 jobs. Well, let's explore this more with Greg Handrick, who joins us this afternoon. Greg, Debenhams is back.
Debenhams is back. Yes, quite a smart, interesting move, right?
Yeah, why? Why is it smart and why is it interesting?
So I think there are two sides to the story. It's an interesting move because they're basically resetting expectations. You've got a group that's basically struggled, been brought through a number of issues, and for both employees and shareholders, giving it a different name is a signal. It's a signal to the market that we're doing something different. Ties in with their new strategy, and it helps everyone to kind of go, yeah, okay, this is going in a new direction. Whether that works or not is dependent on a number of things. The first is, will it sufficiently elevate the group and the gravitas around it with the Debenhams name? I think it will, because that name carries a lot of heritage with it, and it gives it something that it didn't have in the Boohoo name. I think it also tells employees this is different. We're moving on. There's kind of a pre and a post, which again makes it super interesting. It's also a way to shift the narrative. Let's be honest. A lot of folks were talking about salary issues, sustainability issues, those things are still there, and this maybe kind of distracts you a little bit and pushes something else.
Yeah, because just as I was going to say, I mean, Boohoo's had a, compared to where it was 4 years ago at the height of the pandemic, it's not been great, not least of all its share price, which is effectively almost collapsed.
Exactly. And so I think what they're trying to do is basically go, that was then, this is now. By presenting it as Debenhams, it's like a new growth story. So that's I think a little bit the trick that they're trying to pull. The risks that are associated with it are, well, it's still the same company, and therefore, just because you have a different name, do I see it differently? I think that's going to be highly linked to, well, can you maintain the turnaround that the Debenhams group has done and the Debenhams brand itself has managed to do? And therein lies the detail. And just very finally, briefly if you can, Greg, we've seen these high street names that actually just not worked on the high street, but big names like Debenhams. But weirdly, the name does seem to stick. It does seem to do quite well online. It does, because it stands for a number of assets that have been in people's mind for ages. And they associate it with quality, with service, with heritage and stability that were associated with the bricks and mortar age from the past. And I think that's what the group is trying to leverage. And I think that's what's smart. So rather than coming up with yet another new name, they're using an existing asset within which there's a lot of heritage.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Greg, for joining us this afternoon. That's Greg there from Lippincott. Thank you. OK, that is it from me on Business Live for today. Back, of course, tomorrow morning at 11:30. Then join if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin, including this press briefing from the White House on a day of turbulence in the markets and tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. Stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington.